Few nations on earth have a history as rich and ancient as that of Iran. Known to history as Persia, it was one of the cradles of human civilization. With its location so close to the Fertile Crescent, Iran was one of the first places on earth to see agriculture. Civilization began roughly 6,000 years ago with the rise of Elam on the south coast. The Elamites were famed for their sculptures, and many beautiful artifacts remain to this day. They were one of the first civilizations to develop a system of writing which they engraved on clay tablets. The Elamites reached the height of their power around 1500 BC when they controlled much of Mesopotamia. Gradually they lost territory to the Assyrians, and in 647 BC the Assyrians destroyed the Elamite capital of Susa. As the Elamites declined, Persia would come to be dominated by the Medes, who profoundly influenced Iranian history. The Medes left few written sources, so most of what we know about them comes from the Assyrians. At the time, the Assyrian Empire was at the height of its power, controlling the entire Fertile Crescent. Many Assyrian kings would write about their wars in which they would enslave the Medes and take them back to Assyria. This oppression continued for much of the 600s BC. Eventually though, the Medes would get their revenge on the mighty Assyrian Empire. However, they wouldn't do it alone. They would do it by joining forces with the neighbouring state of Babylonia. The Babylonians occupied the territory of Mesopotamia just west of the Medes. They too had been long oppressed by the Assyrians. In 620 BC, the Babylonians revolted against Assyrian domination and became independent. Now, like the Medes, they were hungry for revenge. In 615 BC, the two civilizations formed an alliance and invaded Assyria. They advanced on the capital, Nineveh, and when they arrived, they were met with the most overwhelming sight. Nineveh was, at the time, the most magnificent city in the world. The Medes and Babylonians took the city, and the resentment that had built up over centuries was unleashed in an orgy of bloodshed and destruction. Nineveh was razed to the ground. The Assyrian territories were carved up such that the Median Empire now stretched all the way into modern-day Turkey. This brought the Medes into contact with a new enemy, the Kingdom of Lydia. War quickly broke out, but after a few years a peace agreement was reached. The king of Lydia would marry his daughter to Astyages, the heir to the Median Empire. Astyages took the throne in 564 BC, but he proved an unpopular ruler, and that would be his downfall. At the time, the Median Empire was made up of many client states, one of which was the Kingdom of Persia in the south. The ruler of Persia was a man named Cyrus. He was a grandson of Astyages. Cyrus was popular, and that was a threat to Astyages. The Median king decided that he needed to assert his control over the region. He marched on Persia, but when he arrived, his army were won over by the charisma of Cyrus and defected. We don't know what Cyrus did with his defeated grandfather, but we do know that the Median Empire was now in his hands. This upset the other powers in the region. Babylonia and Lydia viewed Cyrus as a usurper and illegitimate king. War quickly broke out, and Cyrus proved a skilled commander. He defeated the Lydians at the Battle of Thymbra in 546 BC, giving him control of all of Anatolia. Cyrus then conquered Babylon, expanding his empire even further. His territory would come to be known as the Achaemenid Empire. It was the biggest empire the world had ever seen. Cyrus was the most powerful man that had ever walked the earth, and yet he was a relatively forgiving conqueror, treating his enemies with mercy and dignity. His soldiers were forbidden from plundering cities, which was unheard of at the time. He even respected the values and traditions of those that he conquered. For example, he helped the Jews construct the Second Temple of Jerusalem. It's not known how Cyrus died. Some say he fell in battle, others that he was taken by old age. It is known, however, where he is laid to rest, because his tomb still stands. It was designed by him and has survived more than 2,000 years. The Achaemenid crown would pass to Cyrus's son, Cambyses II. Cambyses continued expanding the empire, invading Egypt and capturing their pharaoh. He dreamed of conquering further into Carthage and Nubia, but ultimately made little progress. The death of Cambyses is one of the greatest mysteries in all of history. It's particularly controversial because it may have involved his successor, Darius the Great. Darius was the son of a noble family and rose through the ranks of the Achaemenid military. He wasn't a close relation of Cambyses or Cyrus. In fact, his claim to the throne is relatively tenuous. That might have torn the empire apart had Darius not been a military genius. He vanquished all his rivals in battle. Then, to secure his claim to the throne, he married not one but two daughters of Cyrus and a granddaughter of Cyrus. Darius prided himself on his humane conduct, writing that neither to the powerless nor the powerful did he do wrong. Achaemenid culture took seriously the obligation to be moral, and the greatest sin a man could commit was to tell a lie. Their religion was Zoroastrianism, founded by the prophet Zoroaster over 1,000 years earlier. Zoroaster claimed that there was only one God and that the world was in a struggle between good and evil. Death would be followed by judgment, and the deserving would ascend to heaven, while sinners would be condemned to hell. These ideas would eventually influence the Old Testament, a sacred text in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. With power consolidated, Darius embarked on a big infrastructure plan, building roads across the entire empire and a canal from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. He founded a new capital at Persepolis that became the wealthiest and most magnificent city in the world. However, not all of the Achaemenid subjects were content. The Greek-speaking people of the West were on the verge of a rebellion, and that rebellion would cause one of the most legendary wars in all of ancient history. In 499 BC, the Greek-speaking people of the West rose up against Persian rule. Athens and Eretria supported the rebels, and that made them enemies of Persia. The Achaemenids crushed the rebels and then launched an invasion of Greece. They crossed into Europe and subjugated Thrace and Macedon. The road to Athens was clear, but then the Persian navy was destroyed in a storm near Mount Athos. The Persians were forced to retreat back to Asia. While they hadn't been able to take Athens, they had made significant progress, and 2 years later they returned to finish the job. This time they would launch a direct naval attack on Athens, island hopping their way to the mainland. The Persians made significant progress, taking many islands. They now faced their biggest challenge yet: how to get onto the Greek mainland. They disembarked at the Bay of Marathon. However, before they had been able to secure a beachhead, the Athenian army blocked their exit from the bay. The Greeks attacked the Persians, and despite being outnumbered, they gained the upper hand. The Persians were fighting with their backs to the sea, and after suffering heavy losses, they withdrew to their ships. After this defeat, taking Athens would have been impossible, so the Persians were once again forced to leave Greece. Darius hoped to return with a larger force, but he died before he had the chance. His son Xerxes took power, and immediately he made plans to achieve what his father hadn't. He amassed the largest army that the world had ever seen, potentially more than 100,000 men, and marched it into Europe. Many Greek cities surrendered upon sight of Xerxes' huge army. Athens and Sparta refused to surrender. They led a coalition of almost 30 cities to resist the Persians. The odds were against them. To have any chance, they would need to use their superior knowledge of the mountainous terrain. They met the Persians at Thermopylae in a battle that has become legendary. The Greek army of 7,000 men was in danger of getting outflanked and destroyed. It urgently needed to withdraw. In order to buy time for the Greek withdrawal, 300 Spartans would fight the entire Persian army in a narrow passage. These 300 men knew that they would die. They were sacrificing their lives to fight for their homeland. Wave after wave of Persian infantry was sent to break the Spartan line, but every time they failed, and the Persians took huge casualties. The Spartans were better trained and equipped with bronze shields and helmets. For 3 days, the Spartans held off the Persian army until they were finally outflanked and destroyed. While they had lost their lives, they had bought the Greeks valuable time. The Persians then advanced on Athens, which the Greeks had abandoned. It looked like the Persians might finally achieve domination over the Greek mainland. However, the invasion would be brought to a halt when the Persian navy was defeated at the Battle of Salamis. With better knowledge of the water and the winds, the Greeks won a decisive victory and the Persian navy was destroyed. Unable to keep the army supplied, the Persians were forced to retreat to Anatolia. The Greeks had won. They would never be subjects of Persia. For the next 150 years, the Achaemenid Empire would remain relatively stable. There were frequent rebellions, but they were generally crushed. Another source of instability were the transfers of power, which were often violent. The death of a king would almost always be accompanied by a power struggle between claimants to the throne. Ultimately though, it would be neither rebellions nor succession struggles that would bring down the Achaemenid Empire. It would be at the hands of a Greek who claimed to be a god, a man who died undefeated in battle, having conquered an empire even bigger than the Achaemenid Empire. On his deathbed, at the age of 32, he would refuse to name an heir such that his empire died with him. That man's name was Alexander, and his story will be told in the next video.